Africa.
As the crisis in Palestine continues, the Africa Muslims Agency teams are on the ground facilitating emergency food and medical assistance to the affected families. Donate 15,000 rand or any amount and help the people of Palestine. Call AMA now on 083-251-9376 or donate online at africamuslimsagency.co.za. Africa Muslims Agency, inspiring the spirit of giving.
These days, I'm more health conscious than ever. So tonight, it's stir fry for dinner, cooked in healthy Helios pure sunflower cooking oil. Helios is pure sunflower goodness, packed with omega-6. That's good for your heart. And is approved as part of the Heart and Stroke Foundation eating plan. Dinner's ready! Helios, pure sunflower cooking oil. A healthy family is a happy one.
Approximately 785 million people in this world do not have access to safe, clean water. In developing countries, around 80% of all illnesses are due to contaminated water and poor sanitation. Don't let dirty water end a life. Build a water well in Bangladesh, Malawi, Nepal, Zimbabwe, or here at home in South Africa. Donate to Penny Appeal's Thirst Relief Project to bring safe, clean water to communities around the world. www.pennyappeal.org.za or call 031 1100 573. Penny Appeal. Small change, big difference.
Breaking stereotypes, moving boundaries, joining hands. Salam Media. Humanity sets the agenda.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. As we welcome you once again to another edition of Wednesday Nights with myself, Inayet Wadee. And this evening, we are going to be talking about Saudi Arabia. We're talking about the Saudi agenda in banning the Tabligh Jamaat as the gateway to terrorism. Now, these are strong sentiments that have been expressed by the Saudi regime. And when one looks at the Tabligh Jamaat, it has got a long history, a history that dates back close on to 100 years. Now, in banning this movement, calling it a danger to society and one of the gates of terrorism, the Ministry of Islamic Affairs has actually gone further, calling upon its mosques to allocate a Friday khutbah to warn against the group's misguidance, deviation, and calling them a danger to society. Now, clearly, this has created huge discussion right across the entire world, and numbers conservatively put down the falling of the Tabligh Jamaat to 350 to 400 million right across the entire world and 150 countries. And when one looks at the roots of this movement, started off looking at self-reformation, enjoining what is good, forbidding what is evil. And we've also seen the reaction, and we've seen reaction come through from India as well, where we've seen Maulana Salman Hussein Nadwi saying that the kingdom has always been a loyal puppet at the hands of Zionist powers, and now it is slowly showing its real face to the world in a delusion. And also the former board member of the All India Muslim Personal Law Board saying exactly the same thing. And another prominent scholar from Mumbai and a founder of an online Islamic university saying that, and that's Mufti Yusuf Azad, saying that the 100-year history of the Tabligh Jamaat is witness to the fact that they have not harmed anyone. This decision is proof that the Saudi government is a slave of the West. Now, these are very, very strong reactions that are coming through. And also we're seeing reactions come through from the likes of the Indian government. Now, are we surprised that the Indian government has been the first to respond to this ban that the Saudis have imposed? Because it was the very same Indian government that blamed the Ijtima with regards to the spread of coronavirus. And for a long, long time now, the Tabligh Jamaat in India has come under the spotlight and under the radar. So we've seen politicians from the ruling BJP party supporting the Saudi move, but also looking at the history of Saudi Arabia and looking at the disservice that it has done to the cause of Islam and Muslims in more ways than one, whether we're looking at politics, whether we're looking at even organizations like the Ikhwan al-Muslimin. We look at the number of ulama that are languishing in prison in Saudi Arabia. We look at the change in curriculum, where there has been this proposed change in curriculum of Islamic studies, the selective omission of the ayats of the Quran, particularly those that they deem to be inflammatory. Now, all of this put together tells us and raises questions as to Saudi Arabia, which claims to be the de facto leader of the Muslim world, that, where is Saudi Arabia? Where is the leadership? And how is Saudi Arabia assuming this leadership of the Muslim world? And to take this discussion further, we've got a number of guests that are lined up. We've got a scholar in religion. We've got Umar Sharif, Sheikh Umar Sharif joining us out of India. We've got Sulaiman Patel in South Africa. We're going across to Netherlands, joined by Hizb ut-Tahrir. We're joined by Pala, who is of Turkish origin. And also we'll be joined by Ashraf Patel this evening. But before we get to our panelists, we're going to play out a clip, and we'd like you to take a listen to this clip.
The Saudi government has banned the Tabligh Jamaat, a transnational Sunni Islamic missionary movement. And in the release that they put out while calling for a ban, they refer to it as one of the gates of terrorism. The crackdown has sparked a big debate. To enjoy, what does this statement from Saudi Arabia mean for the organization, and are other countries likely to follow suit, including India?
Well, the important thing is that a year and a half ago, when many of them were arrested, not for reasons relating to terrorism or anything, it was simply because they were having a function in the middle of a COVID blackout. Now, the point is, now, of all those people who claimed that the Tabligh was a perfectly good institution and had been troubled by the government, now what are you going to say? Here is Saudi Arabia, who's taken a long, hard look at the Tabligh and said, well, these guys have a possibility or a link to terrorism, and it is better to ban them. Now that the Saudi Arabs have banned them, and they are the big brother in that West Asian region. If they do it, you would imagine that many other countries which take leads from them could well think of doing it. You could imagine the UAE doing it. You could imagine some other countries doing it. Apart from Iran, which is a little distance away, of course, there are many countries there who are very closely linked to the Saudis. And if the Saudis have gone ahead and said, well, we can't help it, the Tablighis are terrorists, or they are likely to have links with terrorists, and the easier thing is to ban them, the better thing to do is to ban them, then naturally you would expect some West Asian countries to follow suit. Now the question is, what will India do? India has always said that India will not support any terror movement. There is no leeway as far as terrorism is concerned. So this decision will have to be taken by the Indian government to see whether the Tabligh can be identified as a terror organization or not, and then action taken.
Right. We've also got political reactions coming in already from within India, and here is what NCP's Majid Memon had to say about this development that has taken place in Saudi Arabia.
Yes, that was just a clip. And are we surprised that India has been the first country to respond to this ban? And taking this discussion further, we're going to go across now to be joined by our panel consisting of Umar Sharif out of India, Sulaiman Patel in South Africa, and we're going across to Netherlands as well shortly to be joined by Pala. We'll be joined by Ashraf Patel at around 7:30 p.m. And I see our panelists are starting to log in. And we see Brother Pala online already. Brother Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thanks for having me again.
Jazakallah khairan so much. Sheikh Umar Sharif, if I see just the bottom half of your face, if you could just adjust your camera slightly so that we could see you more clearly, alhamdulillah, to see your mashallah, your beautiful face as well. So if you could adjust, there we go. We see you clearly. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Thank you. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. How are you doing?
Alhamdulillah, very well, and jazakallah to you as well for joining us. And I see Sulaiman Patel. Brother Sulaiman, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to you, our honored guest, and all our viewers and listeners, inshallah.
Yes, just to kick off with, and I think, Brother Umar Sharif, I'm going to start off with you, looking at this ban that has taken place. And obviously, one of the first countries that have responded or have issued statements with regard to the ban, and we see the ruling government in India, the BJP government, sentiments from politicians right across India, endorsing what Saudi Arabia is saying, and particularly looking at the Tabligh Jamaat. Now, the Tabligh Jamaat has got a rich history in India. It started off in India. It's well close on to 100 years old. And just your take on this ban and the reasons and the thinking of the Saudis behind this ban.
Yeah, this is a very important topic that we have to discuss on. That the allegation which is made against the Tabligh Jamaat is to say that they are the doorway to terrorism is totally uncalled for, and it's shocking, appalling, and it is rejected. It is strange, and we cannot accept this term which has been made by the Ministry of Saudi Arabia to the extent to malign an entire Jamaat, Tabligh Jamaat, which is there since many decades now. And if we were to see in India, the wolves are waiting to catch the sheep. They're not, bothered about which sheep, whether it's a white or a gray or which breed it is. They just want to nab the sheep, and they get an opportunity when Saudi is going to term them as a doorway to terrorism. Then, on this pretext, the current Hindutva regime, which is waiting to trouble the Muslims, they are not bothered which Muslims. At the end of the day, they want to trouble the Muslims. So they would be waiting for this kind of an opportunity to cause more problems for the Muslims here, irrespective of which Jamaat, because they are simply not bothered about who is right and who is wrong. Their main aim is to cause problem to the minority. So whatever the Indian scenario is, it's a different topic. But I would want to get back to what is happening back there in Saudi Arabia, as we have been seeing since a lot of time. It's emerging in the news that a lot of things that they have decided upon is not consistent with the Islamic ethos, and it is something which we all can agree upon. A lot of concerts that's happening around recently, wherein pop stars are shown on the screen, and a lot of things are happening. The developments which we are seeing, it is all leading towards destruction, which we can all agree upon. And at the same time, what I would want to say is that they are the rulers of the Muslim land. While keeping that in mind, I would want to say it has to be on a consultative means, and it has to be on an advisable means through which we can try to establish diplomacy, and through some goodwill discussion through which we can cajole them, or we can convince them to get back to track. Because if we are going to take sides, we have to take the path of justice. Yes, I'm totally against what the rulings of Saudi Arabia with regards to Tabligh Jamaat being banned. I'm totally against this verdict or this decision of theirs. But the means to rectify has to be through diplomacy, through discussion, through certain level of brotherhood through which we have to gain their confidence. See, it's very easy to bring up two sides. Like two sides, you are for or against. That's a very easy thing to do, but it takes a lot of determination, a lot of strength to bring two sides together. And I'm looking at Muslim unity. I'm looking at Muslims coming together and talking for justice, of course, without compromising on the aspect of justice, and at the same time trying to bring in the governments, the organizations, and the hearts together. So that's my take on this issue to start with.
Yes, Jazakallah, and I'd just like to bring Paula into the discussion now. Obviously you come from a Turkish heritage, and when we're talking about leadership, we're talking about leadership of the Muslim world, the Muslim Ummah, and the Saudis are assumed to be the leaders of the Muslim world because they are in control of the Holy Lands. So basically, de facto a leadership that they obviously have assumed. But looking at it and looking at Islam, looking at the history of Islam, and when one looks at, for a long time now, when one looks at the actions of the Saudis, and we've seen right across the entire world how Islamophobia has manifested itself. The signs of Islam, the Quran has come under the radar. We've seen the hijab come under the radar. But here we're talking of Islamophobia from within, from someone who claims to be the leadership of the Muslim world, where they've become Islamophobic, where certain practices, like for instance, in the case of the Tabligh Jamaat, where dawah has now come under the radar and dawah is being banned. So just your thoughts, looking at it from a leadership perspective, but also bearing in mind that Turkey was was the leader of the Muslim world through the Uthmani Khilafah.
Yes, I think it should not be a surprise that one of the groups within the Ummah of Islam has been banned. Before Tabligh, it was the Ikhwan, and also definitely Hizb ut-Tahrir is not welcome in Saudi Arabia. And we have always said that Saudi Arabia is not an Islamic state or does not represent Islam, because since the creation of the Saud state, the first, third, and even the third state, it is established upon in cooperation with the colonizing British. They have rebelled against Islamic authority at that time. It was the Ottoman Khilafah, and they declared them even as non-Muslims, kuffar, and they shed their blood and invaded parts of the Ottoman Khilafah at that time. Even though the Ottoman state was attacked by the kuffar colonists like Germany, like Britain and France, even then, in this kind of situation, they had the audacity to attack against and spoil Muslim blood. So the creation of Saud and the family of Saud and the state of Saud, it is from the beginning not Islamic. They have killed and spilled Muslim blood, but also through the years, if you look to them, they never fought a non-Muslim country. They, recently, they are in Yemen. They have troubles with Muslim countries. They even a couple of days ago, they agree to normalize the relationship with the occupying Zionist state. So if you look to the history of the family of Saud, who is taking advantage of the situation in a benefit for them, not in the benefit of the Ummah, absorbing also the wealth of the Ummah, just in the pockets of the Saud kings. So you can see that they have this presentation that they do something about for Islam, but in reality, we always want the Ummah for this. They don't. It's just a masker. How do you say? Just a face. And sometimes they use a different face. Now the Saudi is in transition very, very clearly. So they put out the Islamic face, and now they want to have at least something like a secular state, a modern state, and you can see that on with the concerts and get rid of Islamic the few Islamic laws that they had. They want to get rid of them. So it's clear that Saudi Arabia never was Islamic. So they pretended and they fooled the Ummah. And that's why we should not be surprised that the Jamaat within Saudi Arabia are going to be banned. This was expected.
Yes, Jazakallah khairan for that. And just to bring Sulaiman Patel into the discussion, and I see we've got Ashraf Patel as well, will be joining us shortly on audio. Sulaiman, I'm not too sure whether you're frozen, but I see you are on mute, so if you could unmute your mic. And yes, no, I think Sulaiman Patel has frozen. We're going to try and get hold of him once again. But I see Ashraf Patel has joined us as well. Ashraf, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Brother Inayet, Umar, okay, and Sulaiman, warm greetings.
Yes. Now, Ashraf,
well.
yes, alhamdulillah, jazakallah for joining us. Now, Ashraf, you know, I know you want to focus a lot more on the geopolitical implications, but I just want your initial reaction when this ban was introduced.
Well, I think coming from the geopolitical dimensions, it's important to note the very recent past. I would say in the last 2 years, the fundamental trends were in place. Fundamentally, if you look at the murder of journalist Khashoggi 2 years ago, the entire brand, if you like, or the integrity of the Saudi Arabian state and the de facto leader Mohammed bin Salman has taken a deep dive, and millions have been spent to try and revive his integrity on the global stage. He has been snubbed by mainly Western nations. And for the last 2 years, the major diplomatic offensive of the Saudi state and the monarch in particular has been to try and re-establish itself, especially in the eyes of Western powers, because it is a state that is actually subservient economically and politically and in terms of energy to largely Western economic interests. So without that line, he was completely isolated. And so with the Khashoggi murder, the Saudi regime has been isolated. And as a result, in order for him to get back into the global political economy as such, the Saudi state and MSB in particular had to make a range of concessions. And I think it's quite significant that just last week, the president of France, Emmanuel Macron, visited both the UAE and UAE and Saudi Arabia. And it was not just a symbolic visit, it was a substantive visit, meaning that apparently billions of dollars of deals were cut. And what that means is that by Macron visiting Saudi Arabia and the UAE, the West and the European Union have given the stamp of approval, the green light, to say that Saudi Arabia is back. And so the best analogy is the Formula Ones that have taken place in the last 2 weeks, both in Jeddah and in Dubai. They've got the green light to go head speed long with full speed, if you like, excuse the pun. They can go now into the world economy. And so Saudi Arabia is fully accepted within Western circles, within the global political economy. And I think this is the initial reaction that the state is back, that MSB is back in the big way, but he can only be back in the big way if he has the backing of the West. And I think it's quite clear, Europe in particular and the US have said, your number one way to get back is to stop all support or hosting of so-called organizations associated with terror. And you always use the word terror in brackets because the interpretation is different for different organizations or worldviews. And so one is not surprised that, let's say, the Tabligh Jamaat is actually very easy meat. Why? We all know it's a spiritual movement. It hardly poses any threat, basically, to any of the societies in which it operates. There may be some links, who knows, but it has never advocated violence. And so this is quite bizarre. And so it's basically, you know, when you in the jungle and there's easy meat, you go for the prey. And sadly enough, it seemed, you know, the Tabligh Jamaat has been an easy prey for the MBS. But let's say MBS in the West, because MBS is not removed from Western powers. It's part and parcel of a Western offensive. That would be the initial kind of reaction for now.
Yes, shukran for that, Ashraf. And I see we're still waiting on Suleiman Patel to basically join us. But just to get back to Sheikh Umar Sharif, Sheikh Umar, I'm just trying to understand the reasoning, the rationale behind Saudi Arabia, the thinking behind the banning of the Tabligh Jamaat. Just in your analysis, why do you think Saudi Arabia has gone for the banning of the Tabligh Jamaat? If you could unmute, please.
Yeah. First and foremost, I am totally rejecting the rulings or the recent development from the Saudi land against the Tabligh Jamaat for a reason that I take roots from Tabligh Jamaat. My initial days of reformation was from the Tabligh Jamaat. Well, we were so much into worldly life and Western lifestyle, even in India. And it was the Tabligh Jamaat which really worked on people like me and picking me up and doing the initial process of bringing us to the masjids. And later on, we started growing one level after one other level and started reading books, and then we gained a lot of knowledge. So I really can't understand from which angle can they be termed as a gateway to terrorism, because it is totally out of my thinking on what basis they are trying to brand Tabligh Jamaat as a terror outfit or gateway to terrorism. It's really not comprehensible for me. I'm not able to comprehend the fact that they have come out with such a ruling. And it has to be one of the two. One is that purposefully wanting to ban them, looking for some reason to ban them, because to ban them based on some ideological difference, I don't think they will have a way out, because we do understand that Saudi Arabia, it actually works to promote the Salafi school of thought. And here we have Tablighi Jamaat, which is a blend of Hanafi as well as some elements of Sufi is there. So probably they want to somehow ban their literature and their dawa activity, but to get a very strong hold to do so, they might be using the garb of terror gate. By saying that it is a terror gate, it is easy to stop them from entering into the domain of giving lectures and giving dawa to people. So that is one way of looking at. Another thing is what happens behind the screen and what is the network that the MBS has got with the other leaders in the Western world. What is the kind of understanding that they have, and what are the compulsion through which that Saudi has to come out with this kind of a stance. All of these things are going to be something which is just speculative, and which is not going to be based on proofs or evidence. So if I have to say, there's so many things that we can come out with, like so many theories, but would that carry any weight at all? So therefore, I would say it is wrong. It is strange. It is appalling. It is rejected. We will not be accepting the ban on the Tabligh Jamaat, because I do differ with Tabligh Jamaat in the issue of holding to certain ritualistic practices, but they are my brothers in faith. I do hold difference with a lot of people, probably many organizations, but that does not stop us from holding hands and celebrating our brotherhood with each other. And on that cause, on that aspect, I am standing with the Tabligh Jamaat for the rights that is demanding for them.
Yes, I see Suleiman Patel seems to be battling to get through for some reason or the other. But just to get back to, okay, now,
Yes.
just following up from what Umar Sharif has said, and, you
Yes.
know, talking about a terror gate, talking about the Tabligh Jamaat being a danger to society. And when one looks at the language that has been used, and this is very, very strong language coming through from the Ministry of Islamic Affairs, talking about the group being misguided, deviating, a
Yes.
danger to society. Now, these are very, very strong words. And when one looks at the type of language, it's so easy for the entire world to buy into this language and once again put Muslims under the spotlight, under the radar, to demonize Islam and Muslims. And here we're talking about a belief system.
Yes, yes. I think what we should not do is talk in the terms what they do. For example, they talk about deviation within the Islamic creed, or some they are against. So they are against some aqaid issues. But the problem is not the aqaid issues; it's a political and ideological problem. You can see what the Saudi regime is, the rhetoric, what it is busy with, is the same as the West. You know, they have the same language, the West, and also the regimes in the Muslim countries against Islam. And I want to remind you, about the viewers also, about a RAND report after 9/11. You know, Islam was the target, and so they had to deal with Islam. So they wrote a report, and in that report, they mentioned 4 categories of Muslims: conquer and divide. So they said you have this fundamentalist, traditionalist, you have this modernist, and secularist. We should support the secularist, the modernist, but also the traditionalist against the fundamentalist. But years later, in 2019, in December, if I can recall, the same writer, Cheryl Bernard, she wrote that she had made a mistake. That also the traditionalists, who are just Muslim by name, they fast, but they are not very strict. Even they are a threat because they still have deep Islamic emotions. So the idea of the West now is that everything which begins with an I, Islam, everything which includes something of the Islamic belief is positioned as a threat against them. And we can see this very clearly in Europe, how they treat the Muslims here. And they make a link with Islam and security. So it's a security threat. And the same rhetoric Saudi Arabia is now using against the Jama'at within the society. You know, they are putting their the focus on security threat, and that's why they ban. I think this is just an extension. All the Muslim countries and all the regimes in our countries are extension of Western hegemony and domination. And that's why we can't be safe, and that's as Muslim groups, and that's why we should not think that our group is safe and that we can operate under the status quo, and we are silenced. They want to burn all the houses, and we think we are safe in our house because we are tolerated. But the issue is we are tolerated for a certain time. And the time will come that my house is going to be burned. And that's the realization of the Muslim Ummah, which they should understand this. This is the reality. This regimes are against Islam. And every Islamic uprising or development is a threat for them.
Yes. I'd just like to bring Suleiman Patel in. Suleiman, assalamu alaikum once again. Can you hear me loud and clear? Yes, I think Suleiman Patel is having a bit of a problem. He has frozen once again, and we must apologize for that. Suleiman, can you hear me now?
But I'm back online.
Yes, Suleiman, just your reaction, because I know I've been following some of the groups on the WhatsApp groups as well, where you've made certain comments. And just initially, I just want your reaction and your reading into the situation. I think we're going to have to try and get hold of Suleiman on a better line. It does appear as if there are signal issues. We're going to try and get hold of him. But just to bring Ashraf Patel back into the discussion. Now, Ashraf, you have been focusing on the geopolitical implications, but we know that looking at the geopolitical implications, and when one looks at the actions over the of the Saudis over the years, and the point that I had made in my introduction in terms of being a disservice to the cause of Islam and Muslims, where we've seen these actions being proven over and over again. And when one looks at since 9/11, Saudi Arabia, the role that Saudi Arabia has played in the war on terror, which one can translate into the war of terror, and looking at the support that Saudi Arabia has given to many of these powers that have sought to basically demonize Islam, demonize Muslims, and also with disastrous consequences with occupations. And later on, we've seen political dynamics playing out. We've seen the neutralization of the Ikhwan. We know of thousands of ulama that are languishing in Saudi prisons. And all of that, at the end of the day, to appease a certain agenda and to appease the Western powers and Western friends.
Yes, brother Inayet and listeners. Look, in terms of international relations theory. The modernist nation state is a fairly new entity. The Westphalian system, and more recently after the Treaty of Versailles and the Paris Conference. So this notion that we have the nation state, and then with the formation of the United Nations Charter in 1948, it's the nation state in its current formation is only about 70 years old. So it's not like the nation state has been an entity for many centuries. In the current description of nation states, the international relations system is very normative, meaning that it's meant to be rules-based. And this was the ideal of the founders of the United Nations system, particularly Roosevelt and Churchill and Stalin, who basically shaped the post-World War II order. Now, in that period, many nations were being decolonized throughout the Third World, including India, South Africa, large parts of the world. But as part of that decolonization process, a few special countries, monarchies, were insulated from the decolonial process. And as a result, the system of monarchy, and particularly in the Middle East, has entrenched itself and have always played the role of some sort of buffer and client state for Western power. So it's basically neo-colonization theory. And I think Saudi Arabia always was strategic purely because of the mineral and oil resources. And that is why we call it a political economy, meaning that the entire economy is linked to the political system and within the system of international relations. But with the end of the Cold War, we find that the strategic importance of Saudi Arabia is in decline. In fact, I would argue is the Saudi regime as we see it is in terminal decline, and a number of headwinds is making this decline possible. Number one is the oil and gas as an industry is under pressure from climate change activists. Number two, the electronic car, the electronic vehicles is driving power away from oil producers and distributors towards new technologies. And this is making oil, in many ways, it's in long-term decline, although the prices may be high in the current short term. And only because the prices are very high, that gives the Saudi state enormous foreign currency to play a lot of the games that it can play. So it can splash billions of dollars on theme parks, on five-star hotels, on concerts, on Formula One. And by doing that, it generates its own form of soft power. So it's in its soft power strategy, MBS in particular, by basically promoting himself to be a modernist and a consumer person, is basically aligning himself strategically with the West to say, look, we're hosting Formula One. In Dubai, we have the Louvre Museum that cost a few billion. We bought a couple of $1 billion worth of arms from France last week. We're going to complete the war in Yemen. We're fighting the so-called Houthi terrorists in Yemen. Not France doesn't care that Yemen is the poorest nation in the world. The West don't care that the collateral damage will be the women and children of Yemen and other countries. And so this is the Manichean world of international relations. Everything of human rights, of democracy is purely just a lipstick on the dictatorship. So we have a dictatorship and we have now lipstick on the dictatorship, and this is MBS. And this is the ideology that drives Western engagement with a important client state. But it's only important in the next few years, and within 5 to 10 years, it will become irrelevant. And so this is, if you like, I would profess to say this is a kick of the dying horse. The state cannot continue, and it has lost every credibility with the masses. And who are the masses? Basically, the masses is the Ummah. And I think every nation state in every country, despite the various traditions, have come to this realization, whether you're Malaysian, Turkish, Palestinian, South African, Nigerian, they've come to the realization that this current state is completely bankrupt at every level. And so it is the kick of the dying horse, basically.
Yes, shukran for that, Ashraf. And just to remind our viewers that we are coming to you live on the platforms of Salam Media, also on ITV tonight. And we're also joined by Al Ansar in Durban and in Pietermaritzburg, 90.4 FM and 105.6 FM out in Pietermaritzburg. So we are coming to you on multiple platforms tonight because this is an all-important topic. And for us here in South Africa, we know that the Tabligh Jamaat has made huge strides. It's a massive strides as far as reformation goes in terms of self-reformation, but also as Sheikh Omar Sharif had mentioned, that the roots of the Tabligh Jamaat and many people that have joined have seen the benefits in terms of their own personal development and in getting closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and in understanding the deen and the religion of Islam. Now I see Sulaiman Patel is back with us, and alhamdulillah, he is much clearer and on a much better line. So Sulaiman, if you could just unmute please, and just the question that I had raised with you, and I've seen some of your comments come through on some of the WhatsApp groups as well. And looking at us here in South Africa, we know that the Tabligh Jamaat features very, very prominently, but also just looking at our reaction, we know we are far removed from Saudi Arabia. We may not be affected, we may not be impacted, but we've seen countries like India being one of the first to jump on the bandwagon, blowing the anti-terror trumpet, for want of a better term. So just your take, your reaction, Sulaiman.
So shukran jazilan for giving us the opportunity, and Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. The first and foremost thing, I think for me as a South African, one must look at the stereotyping of us as activists initially. We were obviously seen as many of us being pro-government and ANC activists were seen as terrorists pre-1994. But the reality is this, that the world has changed. So post that particular era, we have a whole new domain and dogma that in certain cases, one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. However, when we look at the whole world order, and specifically around this whole issue which has been raised, that before we go globally, one must be very, very clear that stereotyping cannot be condoned in any particular way. And I think one of the two of the colleagues on the panel also mentioned that, or iterated that one cannot just take and castigate a whole group of individuals and put them into one bucket and assume to basically say that you're all terrorists. Yes, we're not saying that everybody in the Tabligh Jamaat could be a saint, but neither are we basically saying that everybody in the Tabligh Jamaat can suddenly be deemed a terrorist. You understand? The reality is this: you've got different folks, you've got different people of different caliber, you've got different type of upbringing, different type of dogmas that people follow, and all of them that basically do dawah or would be classed as being part of those on that. But by its very nature, Islam grew through what? Through the process of dawah, through the process of being able to go and chat about what the deen entails. Through Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam himself, peace be upon him, went out and basically propagated deen by chatting to other people. How did deen grow? How did deen go from person to person? How do we as South Africans and how do we as Africans all embrace this particular deen? Somebody had to come out and give the message. But the interesting thing is here, and the message is very, very important, that why is it that only one particular group of individuals are being castigated? When you have people that are of Christian faith, and when they basically give the faith, why are they being classified as terrorists? If you have people of Jewish faith, why are they not being classified as terrorists? Why is it only the Tabligh Jamaat that basically goes up? Why is it only when the messiahs that are wearing a garb with a tobe and a fez being classified as being terrorists or so-called terrorists? So something is fundamentally wrong, right? If a person can judge based and castigate everybody into one bucket, I think that is firstly completely wrong. From a principle point of view, we as activists need to be able to shout out about this. The second issue is that we should be shouting out loud because it's not the issue of the Tabligh Jamaat, it's because it is a sense of prejudice against one particular grouping based on no evidence. What evidence is being brought onto the table to say, where's the portfolio of evidence? If we want to be judged, if we want to put judge, if our president in South Africa wants to be judged, the question is that you need to be able to show some sort of evidence and provide a portfolio of evidence to find somebody guilty. You can't just go in absentia and take one whole particular group and do that. But now, if somebody does that, then one must think out, hey, listen, there's something not gelling here. What is behind this particular process where a specific group is being targeted? And once we basically have that particular group being targeted and we start understanding why that group is being targeted, then and we can start undoing and start untying this whole morass of ropes that are behind, that are controlling about this. So there's a master puppeteer that's managing this particular process. And we need to understand who is that master puppeteer that's controlling this process and why. We need to be smart. A Nabuwwat and wisdom came to Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam and many of our Nabis after the age of 40. Why? Primarily based that we have to be able to think. That Iqra, the word Iqra was revealed, that why? Learn, understand, assimilate, analyze, and then act. Just don't go and basically shoot from the hip on this particular issue. So let's follow Iqra. And if one takes Iqra and starts understand this geopolitical dynamic of why it is happening, why the geopolitical climate is suddenly now coming in on this particular issue. So yes, our colleague Ashraf was talking about what is happening now and what is there. I'm not going to basically go into that particular game. Let's play the ball on the field. Why have you banned the Tabligh Jamaat? Period. What is the reason behind that? Let's not go into the issues of what the politics does or what one individual does, one president does. Here they're taking millions of people in this bucket and basically saying that you are banned. And on what particular reason that it's there. So for me, the first is, where's the evidence? The second issue is, why now? In terms of those. Those are the two questions that I'm basically posting. And then I'm saying, thirdly, why out of this whole issue? Because all the other monolithic faiths, Christianity, Judaism, Islam, all of them go and we basically have and we work on propagating of your religion or propagating of your deen by word of mouth, by zaban. It's there. Why is it that this has only been done on the Tabligh Jamaat and not the other two? Why? Something is very, very sinister because they're also monolithic faiths. They also basically propagate deen. They also go out openly and you basically have it. In South Africa, we see them at the traffic light. We see them coming on Sundays to your door, whether it's a 7-day Adventist or any of them. Why aren't those people being banned? So if we take those three issues, Inayet, and unpack them, I think we will basically start getting some sort of rationale why it is. We shouldn't go into conjecture or emotions and talk about, all the other issues that's there. Let's focus on the issues and try and unpack it. And inshallah, I think we will be able to come up and not maybe come up with an answer, because we can't, right? We don't control the Saudi regime. We don't control any of that. But at least we can come up and, using the words of Iqra revealed by Jibreel alayhi salam to the Nabi, the first words, we can then try and ascertain what the master plan is. But we must always remember that while we plan and plot, alhamdulillah, the Almighty is the master planner, inshallah. Over to you.
Yes,
Inayet.
certainly. Jazakallah for that, Suleiman. And I'd like to bring Sheikh Umar back into the discussion. Now, I think Suleiman raised quite a few points and talking about the evidence and the proof. And this has been reinforced. And I just want to read out what a prominent scholar from Mumbai had to say, also the founder of the online Islamic University, the Al-Ilm Academy, Maulana Yusuf or Mufti Yusuf Azad, who said that the 100-year history of the Tabligh Jamaat is witness to the fact that they have never harmed anyone. This decision is proof that the Saudi government is a slave of the West. And we're trying to obviously unpack. We're trying to unpack and understand the... And also at the same time, where one looks at Maulana Abdul Qasim Nomani, who said that these charges were baseless and the Jamaat's role was to spread deen, and asked Riyadh to review the decision. Now, we've seen a number of ulama bodies, also Sheikh Omar, who have issued certain statements expressing their concern. And just to look at the consequences of what Saudi Arabia has done and the banning of the Tabligh Jamaat, it could have huge consequences for other countries. We've heard about Kazakhstan, which have banned the Tabligh Jamaat, but also a country like India, Pakistan, where we know the movement obviously has basically started off in India. It could have huge implications and consequences for followers of the Tabligh Jamaat in these countries.
Yeah. I must agree with Sheikh Suleiman Patel. He has, just spoken the words so beautifully and called us to debate over this aspect of why the Tabligh Jamaat is being banned. That has to be the real debate, the core of the discussion, so that once we solve this issue, then everything becomes clear. I think we are being driven to this aspect, and that's very important. Even the West is not bold enough to term Tabligh Jamaat as a door to terror, because they don't want to be termed as fools in front of their masses. Because the Western mentality is that they are much into probing, no matter what it is. They would want to question the government. Unlike most of the developing nations, they are much into probing and questioning and reasoning. And I'm not trying to say that everybody there is intelligent. I'm trying to say they cannot so easily term any organization as a terror outfit or a doorway to terrorism. So no Western country in the world today has, I wouldn't want to call it as guts. I want to say is foolish enough to make such a, such a term, or to make such a statement against an organization. Because an age-old organization, which is near about 100 years old organization, which has been working even before the independence of India, which has been in a remote way contributing for the independence of the country of India in a remote way, wherein the ulama, they have contributed very beautifully, very strongly enough, because they had the connection with the Deoband school of thought and the Darul Uloom. They have wonderfully contributed for the independence of this country, India. And all of these things are before the intellectual people in India itself. And therefore, the Indian government also has not officially made any statement to say that they are a doorway to terror organization, because it is impossible for them to get away from any such opposition. If in case they make such a statement, the opposition here would ask 100 questions for which they will be dumbfounded. But in Saudi Arabia, it is easy. I must say, it is easy there in Saudi Arabia, because the masses are tuned to operate under the monarchy system. The masses are cultured enough to just fear the situation, the master ahead, and to calm down, and they would not be having enough strength to pose any question because of the threat that they will have to enter into the dungeons, which has happened to many of the ulama. So having all of these things in mind, we must say only a foolish government can make such a statement, because without evidence in this era, in the 2021, to make any statement against any individual, to term him as a terrorist, or to call his organization as a terrorist organization without proof, it will become a laughing stock, and that is exactly what is happening to the Saudi regime at this point in time.
Yes, and I just want to pose this question to OK as well. Looking at the consequences for the rest of the world, and we've seen what has happened with the war on terror and how this has impacted on the world at large, and looking at the Islamophobic sentiments that have come through from Saudi Arabia, what does it actually mean for the rest of the Muslim world? And again, I'd like to look at Turkey, because Turkey has assumed the leadership of the Muslim world. But when you have the world that looks up to Saudis as the leaders, as the so-called leaders, for want of a better term, what does this actually mean for the rest of the world?
Yes. I just want to say something about what the two speakers before me said. I think, yes, we should stand up and defend our Muslim brothers there, definitely. But the issue is not only about the banning of one particular group. It is not only Tabligh, it is Ikhwan is also banned, and every opposition who is against the rule is banned. So it is a bigger problem than just banning Tabligh. And we should also understand, I think, that that we are not talking about a reasonable, just government or a system. It is a tyrannical system, as I told before. It is a project of the West, to control the Muslims in the Muslim land. So we cannot ask them to be reasonable, not to deal in just with the Muslim Jamaat. This is not realistic, I think. And your question about Islamophobic behavior of Saudi Arabia, I think it's almost the same as how the West is dealing with the Muslims. It is, you can see that it's a global agenda, and Mohammed bin Salman is doing his job very good as a stooge, as a agent of the West. Of course, there are international political strategic relationships, that's true, but also their hatred against Islam, we are, this is very clear. They recently wanted to ban, or did ban, even the law about how do you say zina. So it's, you can make zina whatever you want. You can drink alcohol. You can, you can party, the mix between women and men. And you can see that maybe 10 years, 20 years ago, Saudi Arabia was maybe for some a model of Islam and representative for Islam. But now I think it's very clear the mosque has fallen a long time ago, and it's just falling. And I don't think the Muslims, I think that the Muslims are well aware that this model of Saudi Arabia is a false model. It's just it's not real. It's serving just Western agenda very clearly and against Islam. I don't think Saudi Arabia is no more followed by the Muslims as a role model anymore. Alhamdulillah, that the real face of Saudi is now shown to the world. It's shown before, but I think the Ummah needs more evidence, probably. And this is the last evidence to what we can present to the Ummah, that this Saudi regime is just a Western extension, nothing more. Just,
Yes, I see, Suleiman. Did you want to add something before we get to Ashraf?
Yes. I always like an opportunity to add. You don't even have to basically say, but I think the important part is, you see, I don't want to get into who's a Muslim country and who's not, right? Because one should not judge lest ye be judged, okay? But I still want to play the ball, right? So I'm trying to understand myself. So I want to give a quick analogy. So carbon under one condition is a pencil. Carbon under another condition is coal. But carbon under another condition can be a diamond. So the guys who are understanding our religion and the guys who are the puppeteers understand our religion better than the Muslim. They understand the religion better than the Muslim. That if you basically ensure that the carbon always remains graphite in a Muslim, then you've won the Muslim over. But if the Muslim can move his carbon from graphite to coal and from coal to a diamond, which becomes unbreakable, then you are basically creating a problem. So what is one of the mechanisms to do that? Is the Tabligh Jamaat, because the Tabligh Jamaat is there to go and polish that carbon to a state of basically becoming that polished diamond, to reflect on what was the teachings, to reflect on the practice of what Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said. That's what it is. So if you stop that, automatically you remain and try and create Islam into this complete state of graphite of its weak condition. So like a pencil lead, it will break. You understand my point? So one must then reflect on this particular issue, that they are coming to the heart of the problem, because the puppeteers and the master puppeteers up there are understanding the macro ways of how to basically take it. They know that, you know what, maybe we as Muslims cannot be united. But when you hurt one Muslim, that brotherhood is unshakable. That brotherhood is unshakable. So if you break a Muslim from a unity and a utopian point of view, that's there. We can never be united. Allah knows when. But our brotherhood, with OK sitting from Turkey, Umar sitting from there, while we sit on this platform with Ashraf and a few of others, we resonate as one brotherhood. That is unshakable. But break that brotherhood, then you will slowly start destroying Islam. And the Tabligh Jamaat is one of the mechanisms to do it. So we must be smart when we sit here. You know, at the age of 55, there's no hair. You still got some left. But the reality is this, we need to look at that level of wisdom of how we need to operate. That we need to understand what is the moves on the chessboard of why these things are happening. And this is not conspiracy theories. This is real. And who do you best use as the instrument, as OK said? Use somebody that's seen as perceived as a Muslim country. What I have in my mind as to what is a Muslim country and what is being practiced as a Muslim country is very, very different today. Who can you look in the world to basically say that is one that would basically show iconically, which would be the closest to that? In my heart, I look at President Erdogan versus the others, and I see him, that if I had anybody to go and make bayt to a Khalif, would be, for example, President Erdogan, for example. In my mind today, that's what I would do. But others would have a different view. The issue is not to get into there. The issue is understand that the forces that are at play are slowly trying to break the pillars down of this, and this is the start. And they will use those who wear the tobe, who wear the fez, who wear the cloth, and they will use them as their weapons to basically bring about the destruction. But we must be wise enough as leaders, and we must be wise enough as the ummah, and we must be wise enough, okay, to be able to stand up to this. And I'm not asking that this is a responsibility of an ulama group in South Africa or an ulama group to basically take this. This is every single Muslim need to be able to understand this, understand the lessons learned, understand the revelation, Iqra. And through this, we then need to be able to start practicing what we have on this issue. And if we can start understanding and being able to start see and deep dive into this, Inayet, I think we'll start coming up with a differentiator. And all of us did it, right? You know, when we were at school, we learned about Shakespeare. But when we looked at the poem, when we read the poem, it was very literal. But when you went into Shakespeare in detail, you understood a very different message coming through. That is the Quran. That is the Hadith. That is the teachings that we have. So we need to be smart, and we need to see on this chessboard, or that is now of geopolitics that's now coming about. How do we place ourselves, and how do we ensure that we prevent it? Because if it happens now in Saudi, where next? India, where next? South Africa? Why is this now coming in, and why are we basically doing it? So we have to put a stop to it, but we have to find a very, very smart way to be able to fight this thing and to argue the points, because to say, gentlemen, put us on and show us the evidence. Secondly, how best? We don't have an Islamic court. We don't have a global court that we can basically take this message to, sadly or unfortunately. Or there might be some other wise people more than me that could come up and placate us and show us how we could do this. But ultimately, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Ghafur Rahim. We need to basically be able to say what and turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and say, you help us on this journey. This is the deen that you gave our Nabi. This is the deen that you've got millions of practitioners in terms of it. And how can we basically work with this in terms of achieving this, inshallah? And I believe you me, we will overcome. Not that one person that basically says this. There's a smarter and a much more wiser way to do it. Part of that is to make sure that all of us on this forum start understanding the word brotherhood, working as one, and moving the carbon, moving the dial from the left to the diamond to the right. And we will achieve, inshallah.
Shukran for that, Suleiman. And Ashraf, to bring you into the discussion. And I think Suleiman makes some very, very telling points, because there was a time where the red peril, where we saw communism was seen as a threat to the West and Western hegemony. And since then, it has become the green peril, for want of a better term. And that is looking at Islam, because Islam is the only ideology that can stand up to whatever the West stands for, whether it's capitalism, whether it's democracies. But sadly, we've seen countries like Saudi Arabia, we've seen countries like the United Arab Emirates, and a number of others that have fallen into this trap. And the question that I had raised with regard to global consequences, Ashraf, because this is going to have huge consequences. We've seen India, we've seen how the ruling party has basically jumped on the bandwagon. They've applauded Saudi Arabia for the ban on the Tabligh Jamaat. We will see other countries that will follow suit. And we will then start seeing Islamophobia in another form manifesting itself, Ashraf.
Very true, Inayet, Suli and colleagues. Look, the political class is the most opportunistic class on the planet. So what we must understand, because remember, as you mentioned, the red peril in the 80s, at that time, the movements like the Tabligh Jamaat suited the West because by preaching apoliticalism, non-politics, by default, they did put some brakes on more anti-colonial projects. So at that point in time, the 80s and 90s, for instance, the Tablighi movement was fit within the Western strategic conception in international relations theory. So it was acceptable. But now, if we look at the nuance, and to answer Suli's question and the other questions very clearly, why is it banned now? At this point in time, at this juncture, it's quite clear. Look, they are definitely not a military or political threat to any regime anywhere. But what they are is a moral movement of simplicity. And quite important, that in itself is a threat in the current context where the Saudi regime under MSB is on a completely Western, decadent consumerism, you name it. You know, Jeddah could have been in the middle of New York last week, or California. You wouldn't know it was Jeddah. That's how this Formula One race took place, and all the concerts and that went with it. Now, if you were to release the Tabligh Jamaat in that system, it would be like an antidote for the cancer of this MSB and his current ideology. So the Tabligh Jamaat is a cultural threat currently at this juncture to the decadence of the Saudi regime. And that is why it's banned. The issue of terror is just used as an excuse. Like during the war on terror, the word terror in international relations was emerged, and it became a narrative, and then it became weaponized, and it entered into international law. So therefore today, to answer Umar's question, the West cannot just brand any nation or movement terror. They have to go through the UN system. And that is a system based on international law. And in order to be designated a terrorist group, you've got to fulfill certain scientific criteria, of which the Tabligh Jamaat does not fulfill none of those criteria. So it is a instrument, they are being completely marginalized and given a bad name purely because as a movement, if they were to operate in the kingdom now, they would stop the decadence just by practicing what they do every day. And that is simplicity, going to the mosque, going house to house, polishing their diamond, as Suli said. So they are a threat. They are a threat not politically, not militarily, but culturally. And I think
But
that's
Ashraf, I
important.
think to your point, it's
Why
a
were they
soft target.
tolerated 30 years ago?
It's a soft target.
Not only a soft target, it is a soft target, but it's strategic. The state, the current state under MSB is a decadent state. It wants to push Western consumer values right into the Muslim world and Middle East. And movements like the Tabligh Jamaat blocks that because of their simple kind of living and lifestyles. And so, therefore, it is a threat. It's a threat culturally to the project of MSB. And therefore, they had to find an excuse to ban it because there can be no evidence whatsoever that they have anything to do with terror. There may be certain members that may participate in certain things that are illegal, but as a movement, they have no evidence or no history, no institutional capacity to conduct anything to do with terror. And so, therefore, they are a cultural threat to MSB. And MSB is mission of modernization is purely neoliberalism. It's purely to promote Western companies, goods, services, and values into the Middle East and into the broader Central Asia. And so there are these dimensions playing itself out. And therefore, Emmanuel Macron, who openly insulted Prophet Muhammad, was welcomed by Mohammed bin Salman. So there's two Muhammads. And yes, France insulted the Prophet under liberty, equality, and fraternity. And yet France and Macron gets multi-billion-dollar arms and trade deals with MSB. So who is Abu Lahab and who is the real Islam? And I agree with Ola, definitely. MSB is the most, and the Saudi regime is the most dangerous regime for the Ummah. And it is completely, absolutely out of the fold of anything. If you were to call Islam in any criteria that you were to talk about, it falls out of that. And so we must be quite clear when we do scientific assessment of these states and how they play themselves out.
Yes, shukran for that, Ashraf. And I see, I think Umar Sharif is just gone off, but I see there's a question that's just come up on the screen, or a comment. Nazir Ahmed Osman writes, the Tabligh Jamaat is the easiest identifiable Muslim grouping, so it was a soft target. The real forces find them to be low-hanging fruit who are actually harmless and non-political. Who else is there? Now, that's a very important and valid question and an important point. Now, Mohammed Kota says this is the time for the Ummah to unite. Now, I think that is where we're going to take this discussion as well. And brother, I'd like to, just on the question of unity and also in terms of assuming leadership. In a situation like this, where Saudi Arabia has issued this banning order on the Tabligh Jamaat, and in terms of taking leadership, in terms of responding, and we've seen organizations on an individual level. We've seen, like for instance, the Jamiatul Ulama out in India issuing a statement saying the protection of the Tabligh Jamaat and its support is a prime responsibility of the ulama and the scholarly fraternity. And this is where I'd like just your thoughts in terms of responding and who would be responsible, because we know that the Saudi Arabians are a law unto themselves. We know there are many Muslim governments that will not stand up to the Saudi regimes, and because they hold a gun, they hold a gun to the head of many Muslims for the mere fact that they are in control of Makkah and Medina. And for that very reason, we find that many people are hesitant to even speak out against the Saudi regime and their actions. Okay. If you could just unmute, please. Unmute.
Yes, sorry. Yes. That's very true. There is an emotional attachment to the Saudi because of Medina and Mecca. But according to the Prophet ﷺ, one blood of un-Muslim, which is spoiled unjustly, is more worth than the destruction of the Kaaba. So we must not think emotional, but we must think intellectual and political. We must be in tune with the reality. And the reality is that Saudi Arabia, with all the other Muslim countries, they are all not ruling with Islam, and they are all corrupt, and they have, they are working with Western powers. This is the reality. We can't deny this, and we as Ummah must understand, have this political awareness. What's the situation of the Ummah, and what is the situation, and what are the plans of the kuffar in our lands? We must be aware, not only as the ulama, but as an ummah. It is an obligation for us as Muslims within this global and noble ummah to work again for the reestablishment of Islam. At this moment, Islam is not established, maybe in some rituals, but that's it. Islam, as it has been brought by the Prophet ﷺ, it was established in a state. Islam could be protected, and the Muslim blood could be protected, and the message of Islam could be sent to the world. And this is absent from 1924. As a ummah, we did not have the same situation before. We had always, with ups and downs, we had always a leadership. We had always a Khalifa. We had always some protection. But at this moment, we are so divided in different countries, and we don't have a leadership who can protect us. We don't have a leadership which can implement Islam in its totality. So, as an ummah, we must be aware of the plans of the colonist kuffar, and what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is expecting of us, because it is our duty to bring back Islam in a state so we can be united. Otherwise, we can't be united. The idea of unity is not that everyone should think the same. That's not a reality. If you look to South Africa or to Holland, you have different groups, different parties, but the political unity, which is keeping them all together, that's what we need. As an ummah, we have difference, we have Jamaat, this is very good, no problem. But there are some also things which connect us, and the real unity is on the one state where we give the bay'ah to a Khalifa that can rule with Islam. This is the reality. And we did this practice for 1300 years after the Prophet ﷺ. And now it's absent. And now we are in despair. And now the same, we are talking about Saudi. We could also talk about Yemen. We could talk about Turkey. We could talk about other Muslim countries. All the same. That's why I think this should be, again, a realization that we as an ummah have a duty and responsibility to carry Islam, political Islam, because the goal, if you want a political unity, you have to be a political, you have to have a political method to realize that. We should be aware of the political situation, and Islam is a political system also. We can't, you can't deny that. The Sharia is a political system. We should strive to bring that back as an ummah. Work hard to bring that back.
Yes, Suleiman, I know just as a follow-up to the question with Pala, and I know you feel very, very strongly about responding and about responding adequately, and also at the same time in terms of how we should respond and who should respond. Now, the point that I had made quite early in my introduction, where I spoke about Maulana Salman Hussein Nadvi, who said that the kingdom has always been a loyal puppet at the hands of Zionist powers, and now it is showing its real face to the world in delusion. Now, this is a very, very strong and a very, very powerful statement that was made, but for far too long, we've seen Saudi Arabia with their actions, and we've seen, the failure, or we've seen the hesitancy from many quarters, from leadership, to actually respond to Saudi Arabia and the type of actions that they have obviously been guilty of whether it has been their support on the war on terror, whether they've made their bases available to the United States of America and the Allied powers to bomb Iraq into the Stone Age, whether they banned the Ikhwan, what they've done to in Egypt in terms of the removal of Mohammed Morsi. So all these actions, and now the latest being the Tabligh Jamaat. And I know, you feel strongly about that. We've seen, as I mentioned, Jamiatul Ulama Hind issue a statement saying that this is a prime responsibility of the ulama. We've seen our own Jamiat KwaZulu-Natal issue a press release today. There was a statement that had come out. And let's just talk about, because the ummah is looking for direction. The ummah is looking for guidance. And who is there to guide the ummah at times like these, when events or when developments like these take place?
So, discussions like this, unfortunately, we don't have enough time, because I'm just looking at the time, and, we need to basically move within the next few minutes. We're going to be rounding up. But I raised my issue, and I gave the colleagues an opportunity to respond, and I don't think my question was answered, that why now? So I want to give you an indication of why now. So, basically raised the issue that the first master plan was to dismantle the Ottoman Empire and remove the Khilafat, which they achieved. The second master plan, which they basically looked at, was the issue on Palestine. Create that and automatically start creating the level of disunity, right? That was a clear master plan in terms of starting to create disunity by the state of Palestine. The third issue was the Middle East, in terms of dividing it, conquering it, and creating this festering wound in the Middle East with all its issues that we basically have. And yes, we had the Arab Spring, and we'll see many more. But ultimately, this level of instability was the third cog in this century. Okay, and all happening in a period of 100 years, less than 100 years. Right? Remember, 1920, we're now in 2021.
Suleiman, if you could just unmute, I see you've just muted.
This is a master plan this is a master plan that's been orchestrated with a timeline, with a project. There's a project plan underway. There's a fine timeline to this project. There's milestones that needs to be achieved, and it's happening. And we can't see it, right? Because we're still so worried about the Jamiat, and we're still so worried about those. That's minute. The bigger cogs at play is make sure that you create an unstable Islamic community. And Islam should not be socially strong. Create and ensure that if you remove and create instability in the concept of brotherhood and in the concept of taqwa, then you have won. If you have created instability in taqwa and brotherhood, then you have won over Islam. That's their agenda, right? And that's what they're basically playing at. So this is not about the issue of a letter or somebody shouting out. It's not going to work. You need to be able to say this. But what scared them, or scared the hell out of them, was the united movement of the people during the Arab Spring. That created a class struggle from the bottom up that shook the echelons, that shook the thrones, that basically that are propped up. And then they basically realized, that what is holding these forces together, what is holding this together, then they started to understand was the spark of brotherhood. And if you destroy and try and extinguish that spark, then you would succeed. And now they know that with this issue where they've got the Muslims fighting each other, removing the dictators or whoever that you want to call it in the sense of democracy, in their new democracy that they're imposing, they said we need to be able to ensure that these pillars that create a level of brotherhood start destroying them. So for me, Inayet, the worst case is to try and expect our ulama bodies in South Africa to start shouting out and saying letters, because it's meaningless. If every one of them shouted and everybody gave a letter, do you think it's going to sway the Saudi decision? Absolutely not. But if you have the whole Muslim voice of the Ummah, as said, Ummati, all shouting out and saying something is now basically coming in, then the earth will shake. You understand? But at this particular point in time, one Jamiat, one ulama, one letter come, it's meaningless because they're dividing and they're conquering. And Ashraf said that they're playing out their agenda and we're falling into it. We need to change and reverse that dynamic and understand the geopolitical landscape and how we can overcome it. So for me, if we understand these dynamics, they now know that now the Tabligh Jamaat, what are the next hotspots that we're going to hit? Because before the Tabligh Jamaat, remember, they started to change the syllabus in the madrasas and the schools. They started to change on the different documents and the Quran and the ayats, etc., that they wanted to. So there's an agenda, there's a clear plan. You know, I always say, what's the plan? It's to follow the dots, connect the dots. Connect the dots and you start understanding what's happening. And the problem is, Inayet, we don't have enough guys to connect the dots. We need the Ashraf Patels of the world to stop being academics, and they need to start helping us, coming to the party to basically say, listen, how do we start connecting these dots so we can plan? If you can start connecting the dots and start planning, then we will have a way forward, inshallah.
Yeah.
Yes, I see Ashraf, you'd like to come in. Yes, go ahead, Ashraf.
Yes. Look, I think those narratives we all agree. There's no doubt what Suli is saying is good things, but we must be very clear. The dots are connected. It's an ordinary illiterate Muslim in Zanzibar would be able to connect the dots. So it's not relevant to say connect the dots. The dots are connected. You just look at the behavior and the attitude and what's happening as we speak at this point in time. So it's clear, that's evidence-based. And so you look at the trial of Jamal Khashoggi. Again, the West, France in particular, Europe, the entire foreign policy is based on free media and freedom of speech. But they would not hesitate, for instance, Emmanuel Macron, who has insulted Prophet Muhammad, by the way. And this same leader of France can go to meet Mohammed bin Salman, and he is welcomed with a royal carpet treatment and given billion-dollar deals. The dots are connected. There's nothing else to connect. And so we should not be naive or even counterproductive as we do narratives, because it's there. It's an open secret that the regime has lost all credibility. In fact, it's a rogue regime. There is no nation state in the world or leader that can assassinate a journalist. And it's proven. I mean, I think the Turkish government has provided most of the proof or all of the proofs. And how can such a state be welcome on the global stage? By Western nations, whose very cornerstone of international relations is a free media and freedom of speech and free expression. But it is okay to instrumentalize it and insult the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And this same leader, Mohammed bin Salman, can receive that President Macron. The dots are connected, Sulay. What is more to connect? It's up to the ulama to speak out, because they seem to be the legitimate or institutional voices. But if they are silent, then where to? Where is the leadership? So these are bigger issues of how we selectively apply social justice. Because social justice, international law are common. They are all framed in international law. And this is where the regime is. It is a rogue regime as far as the trial of Jamal Khashoggi stands.
Yes, shukran for that, Ashraf. We've got some comments that obviously will flash through the screen in a minute or so, and we will address some of those comments. But yes, Mohammed Kota says it will be interesting to hear the views of the Jamiatul Ulama South Africa on the banning. Well, I'm hoping somebody from Jamiatul Ulama South Africa is listening and possibly put out a statement and get their views. Shukran for that, Mohammed. Tahira Umar writes, maybe this target is good, wakes its ummah up, which has been sleeping and only going after money. Well, definitely, Sister Tahira, we will ask one of the panelists to comment. We've got Sabiha Surki says, the Prophet ﷺ has already prophesied the devil will rise from the Holy Lands. And we need to say that, we need to say it as it is. Dajjal minions are at play, setting up his arrival. This is a real test for the Ummah. Shukran for that, Sabiha. And we've got Mohammed Kota. The question is, where do we begin to get the Ummah together? We will ask Brother, to comment on that one. And the next one says, our ulama will not dare to condemn the Saudis in the masajids. And that comes from Mohammed Kota Suleiman. I see you shaking your head. Just bear that in mind. I'm coming to you with a question. But I see there was a release that came out through from the Jamiatul Ulama KwaZulu-Natal. And just to share with our viewers and listeners, the Jamiatul Ulama has said that in light of the recent decision to ban and condemn the Tabligh Jamaat by the Saudi Arabian government, the Jamiatul Ulama KwaZulu-Natal is appealing to the ulama and the khatibs to dedicate and make mention in this week's Jummah Khutbah, which is on the 17th of December 2021, regarding the virtues and the remarkable efforts of this illustrious and noble movement that has kept Islam alive throughout the world, both in Muslim and non-Muslim countries. The Tabligh Jamaat is furthest away from the accusations leveled against it by the Saudi Arabian government. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless this noble work and keep it alive to the Ummah with strength and fortitude in the fight against immorality and irreligiousness. Now, that is just part of the statement that was issued by the Jamiatul Ulama KwaZulu-Natal. Brother, yes, the question that obviously had come up, and I said, I would like your comment on that. If you could please go ahead.
If I could not hear you almost at all.
What I will do is I'm going to ask my engineer to flash that question once again on the screen. Hopefully you will be able to read it when it comes up, so that you get the gist of a question. But also I think Suleiman, just to bring you into the discussion while the engineer is flashing that, looking at the issue that I had obviously raised in terms of the Jamiat obviously issuing a statement, which is the one thing, but also at the end of the day, I think, where to from here for us as a Muslim Ummah? Because, the point I had made is we need guidance, we need direction. Who is there to guide us and direct us?
So I like to answer it very, very simplistically. I was taught in Madrasa that the intention is better than the deed. In the Ma'amala Bindiya. That is what we've always been taught, the basics of that. So we should not forget that. So the one, some of the brothers and sisters came on very frustrated. They put some of the comments on that some of the ulama, etc., will not raise this issue because they want to be banned from Saudi Arabia because of that they're scared that they can't visit Hijaz. Which Muslim does not want to visit Hijaz? Even the few of us that are on this chat, we would love to basically be there today at the road of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, giving durud and giving salam and salutations. Every single one basically be so. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells you that yes, there are people that can come and be obstacles in your path. There are people that can come. But if I want you to have your Hajj and I want you to have your Umrah, I will give you that benefit. So the question comes down to your issue of your deen and your iman that we should basically look at. We must be very, 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 very clear that while we basically sit here, that's why I said we must not judge, let's we be judged. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows what is the caliber of your iman, and if you are basically prevented from basically going into Hijaz, your Hajj and Umrah, inshallah ta'ala, will basically make it and give you a Hajj Mabrur and a Hajj Maqbool if you are basically stopped for it. He can do it, not me and you. So we should not basically fear that. We don't fear that in terms of this issue. What we should be able to do is to make sure that we can actually actively go in and be able to try and change and transform that narrative. And in this particular case, we know what is their plan. Ashraf has said that he thinks the dots are connected. I disagree. I think we're only starting to understand, how masterful these bigger puppeteers and players are on the world stage and what they're setting up for. Tahira has basically come forward and spoken about the Jal and all those particular issues and the prophecies that are coming. And yes, we can see them are being unpacked as we are, right? But I'm not a jurist to get into that. The issue for me is very, very clear. We have to basically come up as a ummah and at minimum start shouting our voices as civil society. If civil society can start embracing this, and if civil society can start raising up, then we will basically achieve. Now, if you take, for example, BDS and the issue of Palestine, alhamdulillah, it has been successful. But if I go to South African Muslims, and if I go to South African Muslims above the LSM level 4 and 5 and say boycott and don't go to Saudi Arabia for your Umrah or your Hajj, Do you think anybody will listen to me? The answer is, who are you to tell me? That is the reality. That is the weakness that we have today, because every single person up there will say, I want to go. And many of us, it's quite fashionable to go for Umrah every single year. And the reality is this, that we want to basically go in with the view of doing it. Do you think you're going to stop that particular person from going in? So is boycotts going to be effective? It's one weapon that can be used very effectively. But if it is not done cohesively, and if it is not done in an appropriate particular matter, it's not going to achieve. If everybody starts coming up and starts really, really going before the Kingdom of Saudi Embassy and basically goes there after Friday, after Jummah, and says, stop, and ensures Islam has got rights and civil liberties, and we must protect that. But how many people do you think that are going to basically come up there after Jummah on a Friday? How many? So the issue is that we now need to then be able to be very smart, that the weakest form of our iman is dua. What we need to be able to do is to say, how can we go and physically and whatever mechanisms that we can use to talk about this. But the important part is that I'm not asking for unity. I'm asking for brotherhood of thought, leadership, to say that dawah is an important pillar of our faith. It's an important construct, an element of our faith in terms of giving the rights to do that. You cannot take it away. But on the other hand, we should all basically sit down and pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to say that this level of injustice that's now basically taking place, okay, is no different to the murder of Khashoggi in that particular embassy. It is no different to the murder of the millions in Yemen, to the complete annihilation of sex in Syria, to the fact that we don't basically condone, that we are condoning the actions of the people against Palestine. These are all factors that we have to then start bringing across and to say that those few people and individuals masquerading as the Islamic leadership in the Middle East, we should see through them. We should see through their policy. We should see through their emperor's clothes. Okay, and be able to then understand that we will have to pave this way. But that can only happen if civil society unites and mobilizes with regard to this. And that's my view in terms of how we should be able to then achieve a successful turnaround and basically remove what these people are doing. But that cannot happen if we are not going to basically tie our camels. And part of that is to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help us on this particular way of transforming and achieving this and bringing and mobilizing that level of brotherhood to try and achieve this, inshallah. And only then, it might be a utopian view, but I think at least we can start coming in together and be able to do that. And look at alternative ways to see how we can bring redress against the Saudis around us economically, from a boycott point of view. What are the different options that we have to talk out against the Saudi regime? How else can we basically then stop buying Saudi Arabian products if we want to? What are all the different ways? There's many, many ways that we can look at it. Even if we have to try and find where we can get alternative means of fuel and so forth. We know Saudi uses all fuel coming into South Africa. Most of it is coming in from Saudi. What are the different options that we have? We have to be able to do it. The Qataris showed us the way. When Qatar was under threat, for good or for bad, I'm not going to debate that, but at least they found alternatives and embraced alternatives. We should also look at that particular alternatives and see how we can do that. Over to you, Inayet.
Yes, shukran for that. Yes, okay, just to bring you into the discussion now, with Hizb ut-Tahrir, and we've seen this obviously not new to people that are doing dawah, that are being persecuted, and we've seen it right across many other countries, countries like Uzbekistan. We've seen it in some of the other countries where Turkmenistan, and also in countries like in Kazakhstan as well, where we know the Tabligh Jamaat has been banned. So we know that Hizb ut-Tahrir, for doing the work of dawah as well, have been banned and have come not only in Muslim countries but also in other countries around the West, where you've come under some severe pressure from governments. Now, one of the major concerns is Saudi Arabia taking a step like this, and how this could possibly impact own countries in the West, both in the Muslim and the non-Muslim world. Now, this is something that one needs to be careful of, one needs to be aware of as well. And I think, looking at where you are at this point in time, also in a country like Holland, for instance, where we see this right-wing sentiment, we see Islamophobia that has manifested itself very, very strongly. I should have spoke about France, and we see it across many other countries around Europe as well. And all these countries look up to a country like Saudi Arabia as the leader or the de facto leader in the Muslim world.
Yes, I think maybe I'm going to answer your question, inshallah, but I want also to add something about our previous guest. The Jamaat, as you told, the reality is that there is a really dominant ideology, which is not only dominant in the West, but also in the Muslim countries, with a very specific agenda and Islamophobic against Islam. And this is the reality. And within this framework, Muslims are seeing this and trying to change the reality, trying to change a better situation for Islam. And what I can see is that the Jama'ah who are working are trying to get a place within the status quo. There is not an ideological definitive change or a strategy or a vision to change the Islamic world in its entirety. It is just to cope. For example, we are talking about Jamaat Tabligh, but before Jamaat Tabligh, other parties were also banned, but we did not say it. We did not hear a lot of condemnation from Jamaat Tabligh at that moment, and this is a reality which is not only specific for Tabligh, but this is in general, and this is because we have an idea of change that is being accepted or working within the status quo. But as a Muslims, we should dramatically change. We have to have a mindset, a new mindset, and a new paradigm, where we see Islam as a real alternative ideology, not only for the Muslims but for the world. Look at this world now. Not only the Muslim world, but the world is in despair. Economic crisis, akhlaq, which is gone. People are astray. Relationships are, very big problems in the West. But also they introduce them also in the Muslim world. We, as carriers of the light of Islam, we have big responsibility. We have to think ideological. We are not only Saudi Arabia, but the Muslim world. We should think in the Muslim world as our playground, and we have a new alternative. We want a complete change, not just being a part of how do you say, tolerated within the status quo. If we work like this, we can never enter circle. That's why we should present and work to give an alternative for the humankind. And Suleiman talked about change. How are we going to change this? We should step. And the first person who changed the society was Muhammad alayhi salatu wassalam. He changed Darul Kufr to Darul Islam. There are big lessons to learn from the Prophet, how he interacted with the society and changed the ideas and the emotions of the society, and finally changed the system of the society, which is ruling the people and taking care of the affairs of the people. And I think we have to study the prophetic method where the Rasulullah alayhi salatu wasalam changed the society. And this is not a very difficult or very deep and complex thing. It is very easy. All what we have to do, we have to have the political will and the vision, and we have to work for it in a concentrated way.
Yes, I see we've
Very
got
true.
about 9 minutes before we
Yes.
end the broadcast, and I'm going to go around and Ashraf, starting with
Gee.
you, I'm going to give you about 3 minutes, Ashraf. Final thoughts and anything else that you wish to add.
Look, I think all the speakers in their own way have put in good points, but it has to be a proactive approach and it has to be political because it's, in international relations, we call it the political economy. They're not linked, they're not isolated from the broader ecosystem. And this is quite difficult to digest because, for instance, the Tabligh Jamaat has been apolitical, non-political all its life. And so can you just imagine the signal they sending to activists to say that if we can ban a non-political organization, imagine what we can do to you if you want to become an activist in the Middle East. So it is a warning, and it's a dire warning. It has serious human rights implications. It has serious implications for people and their struggle and their rights. Yes, dua is the weakest form of Islam, but Islam teaches you there are higher, more significant ways of protest. Otherwise, South Africa would not be liberated. And so we cannot then just dismiss these issues. This is a clear and present danger in the current regime. It's a rogue state. It murdered. There has been an assassination of a journalist in a foreign territory, in an embassy. I mean, this goes against every international law. The Geneva Convention, you can name 10 different conventions, and yet Mohammed bin Salman gets a red carpet treatment. And so this clearly shows the hypocrisy of the West in Europe. It shows that they don't value human rights. So human rights is merely an instrument of Western powers. It's instrumentalized and used and abused. And so this is now showing up. And so both the West and MBS is exposed. And so one can only conclude that it is the kick of the dying horse. Throughout history, Saudi Arabia has been the useful idiot of international relations. Every Western leader has used it because it has the resources to buy arms and to prop up political careers. So Macron is going into an election next year. What better thing to go and sell arms so that he can preserve jobs in France? And so the entire system is used and abused, and it's actually quite a joke. But it's also a tragedy for the Ummah and for the activists, because all those activists now in Saudi Arabia who would think 3 times before they make one statement. So there is no voices there. And if we keep quiet, absolutely it will continue and continue. And so choices are to be made. That is the world of activism.
Yes, and obviously talking about voices, and a lot of those voices have been silenced when one looks at the thousands upon thousands of scholars and ulama that are languishing in the prison cells of Saudi Arabia. And Ashraf sent me a message talking about a development in 2019 where at that point in time, Malaysia, the Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad issued a statement that Turkey, Malaysia and Pakistan can pave the way for development in the Muslim world, and talking about the Islamic world that needs a renaissance. So, I see there's another question that says it will be interesting to hear the views of Jamiatul Ulama South Africa on the banning, and we hope that a statement will be issued. But I think, Suri, just, in closing, and I'm going to give you about 2 or 3 minutes as well, talking about following up from this statement about the Islamic world needing a renaissance, but also within our own communities, within our own societies, we need a renaissance of some sort as well, to recognize what we have been talking about, to recognize the Saudis for what they are, for who they are, for what they stand for the actions that they take. And I think just on that note, I need a comment from you for about 2 or 3 minutes, please, Suleiman.
Shukran jazeelan. So, whenever we come to concluding remarks, I like to summarize. So I think the 2 or 3 messages that are clear. The one is that go back to Revelation, Iqra. Learn, understand, read, assimilate, and then apply your mind. That's very, very important. If Iqra can become a philosophy that we follow, where we don't follow our religion like sheep, but we start practically understanding our religion and our deen, then alhamdulillah, we will basically achieve. I'm not asking everybody to go make tafsir of the Quran and suddenly start prophesizing that tomorrow, but I think the reality is this, that we have to be able to be very, very smart and apply just common sense in terms of being able to say that follow what was the first words revealed to Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So that's the first positive good news, because Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam and alhamdulillah showed us the way, and Jibreel alayhi salam and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala showed us the way, that if we can understand and we can move, we can do it. The second issue is, and why? That means it's important. If there's a green snake in the green grass and a black snake in the green grass, which is the least of the threat? The black snake in the green grass. Why? Because you can see how it operates and where it's going, and you can defend yourself. Worry about the green snake in the green grass. Those Muslim countries, they say that they're Muslim. Many of them are green snakes in the green grass. Be very, very careful. Rather assume that, listen, these are black snakes on the green grass, so we know how they work and how they operate, and we can protect ourselves, and inshallah we'll be able to manage with Iqra to be able to overcome these forces of batil that they're throwing at us with regard to that. So that's a practical and tangible step. The third is, and I wish them well, but there's no way that the Saudis, that during the period of Hajj, if there's 2 million people going, that even if they employ sophisticated situational and awareness and all the surveillance that they want, dawah can happen with 2 people talking to each other, and even giving salam is dawah. You know, so how do you stop this big dawah? How do you stop salam? You cannot, unless they basically want to do it. So it's going to be completely foolish unless they appoint for every single Haji that's going there. Therefore, they'll have one religious policeman sitting with every single person. And yes, they can use technology to do that, but dawah is salam. If we just relate and start getting our salam, that's a means of dawah. And if we see when we go to Hajj, don't sit in the cafeterias, don't sit in your hotels, just greet everybody and say salam alaikum. That is dawah. And it's a very, very smart way of being able to overcome this. But the important lessons being learned is that now we are targets by our own, or perceived by our own, in terms of this. So we cannot basically be unaware. If you're going outside your door, you know there's going to be muggers or there's hijackers of vote, you take necessary precautions. So the situational awareness of the Muslim needs to come out. The Muslim cannot basically be hiding and assume behind the parda or behind the topi or behind the cloak and or the tobe that we can, it's business as usual, it's business unusual, it's religious unusual. We need to be able to understand how we can basically draw that line. And for the few of us that have got the privilege of the Tabligh Jamaat coming into our home and the Tabligh Jamaat coming out to the masjids, we must say shukr, shukr, shukr Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We must make so much shukr for this particular benefit and nemat, that maybe South Africa can become that new diamond of the Middle East and become the Muslim country that other Muslim countries are supposed to be. Who knows? Inshallah, it can happen, right? So we don't know. So we must have a positive attitude. We must be positive about these developments because we understand the black snake, and we can manipulate around it. But last but not least, in our hearts, our iman must be there, that we should basically make that 2 rakats and basically say, Ya Allah, in the Quran, you said that while we plan, you are the master planner. Open up your karamat, open up your miracles to open up these doors of dawah, that more of the world can do it. And more, while Saudi Arabia is targeting the Tabligh Jamaat, look at the number of people over the world that are crossing the line into Islam. Look at the number of people from Europe, of Muslims that are coming into Europe and changing the dynamics and demographies of Europe. I believe one of the brothers is from in the Netherlands, where I was and studied. So the reality is that you got such a good opportunity in terms of where we want to go. So alhamdulillah, let us not fear. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is by our side. Our iman is there. And each of us we cannot attain unity, but brotherhood, yes, we can. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, with one brotherhood we will achieve. And if we can work on that and get that, and stimela ahead, as we use the South African word and Makasi word, stimela, move, and we must move towards getting that, where we can achieve that stimela in terms of being able to push ahead and steam ahead with that oneness and with that belief system. And remember our kalima and our shahadat, inshallah, in front of us. Nothing will stop us, inshallah.
Shukran for that, Sulaiman. Brother, okay, final thoughts. If you could unmute, please.
Yes, I forgot. Sorry. If we, this is true. We should have, we have brotherhood, and but this brotherhood without a political entity which is preserving us, and this brotherhood is just academic, just emotion. But this brotherhood could be real when it is not academic anymore, but united within a political reality, political state, an Islamic state, Khilafah. Then the real brotherhood we can see. You know, then it is the glue. It is the glue, inshallah. Barakallah fiik.
Jazakallah khairan so much for that to you, okay, Paula, and also Suleiman Patel, Ashraf Patel, and I see Sheikh Omar Sharif, who obviously had left us a bit earlier on. But it's been wonderful having you part of the panel and the discussion tonight. Alhamdulillah, I think it's been most interesting, very, very absorbing, and I think there was a lot that has actually came out in terms of what we had to unpack, covering this topic on the banning of the Tabligh Jamaat in Saudi Arabia. So to all of you, Allah accept, Allah reward your efforts. Jazakallah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Assalamu alaikum.
Well, that brings us to the end of another edition of Wednesday Nights with myself, Inayet Wadee. And once again, it's been an absolute pleasure being in your company, the Salam Media listeners on the various platforms, the platforms of Al Ansar in Durban and in Pietermaritzburg, who join us tonight, and also our ITV viewers. It's been wonderful having you with us. So until we meet again, from myself and the team, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.